All right, good day everyone. We are the group 10 and for today's discussion, we are going to talk about the biodiversity and ecosystem. So this is in our subject science, technology and society. So here we are exploring the interconnectedness of life and the importance of conservation. By the way, I am Connie Sarita Bicas together with Miss Muhammad Raisa and Telior Megan. So without any further ado, let's get started. Moving on to our introduction, so from the early times, when ancient philosophers of nature tried to explain all things as coming from the elements of water, fire, air, or earth, science sought for the common characteristics, a unifying element. In all of nature's phenomena, there was a growing awareness of how all living things are related to each other. So, an idea that is called biodiversity. So, for our introduction, it describes the historical development of yung concept ng biodiversity. So, it explains the ancient philosophers attempted to explain the world through the four elements. Yun na yung water, fire, air, and earth. So, later, science sought a unifying principle to explain the interconnectedness of all natural phenomena. So, this lead to a growing understanding of how all living things are related. So, a concept that is now known as biodiversity. Now, for our learning objectives, we have here a list of learning objectives for module on biodiversity and ecosystem. So, by the end of the module, students should be able to first define biodiversity and explain its importance for healthy ecosystems. Second, identify major threats to biodiversity, such as habitat loss, pollution, climate change. Another thing is describes key components of an ecosystem like biotic and abiotic factors. Next is explain how human activities impact ecosystems and the value of ecosystem services. And lastly, to analyze the relationship between biodiversity and ecosystem stability and discuss the role of conservation efforts. Now let's move on to our next slide, the biodiversity and ecosystem. So it is says here that it's defined as a vast variety of life forms in the entire earth. So it encompasses all kinds of life forms, from single celled organisms to the largest multi-celled organisms. It is defined as a vast variety of life forms on Earth, so encompassing all life forms from single-celled organisms to the largest multicellular organisms. Another thing, um, its definition is an structural and functional perspective and not as an individual. So, its definition is from a structural and functional perspective and not individual one. And lastly is biodiversity. So when we say the biodiversity, it is the source of the essential goods and ecological services that constitute the source of life for all and has direct consumption a consumptive value in food, agriculture, medicine, and industry. It says that it's the source of essential goods and ecological services that constitute the source of life and has direct consumption value in food, agriculture, medicine, and industry.
So, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Reza Muhammad, and I will discuss the types of biodiversity. The first one is the species diversity. So, the different types of species in a community, the extent of species diversity in the different areas is referred to as species richness, which is dependent on the varied environmental conditions. For example, species diversity besides large bodies of water would be richer as compared to our far from bodies of water. So this one, imagine a forest near a river. So the river provides water for trees, fish, and insects. So the forest itself offers different types of vegetation for animals to eat and place to hide. So this combination of resources and habitats allow for a greater variety of species to live in the area compared to a forest far from water. So the next one is the ecosystem diversity. So the different types of ecosystems such as terrestrial or aquatic, natural or artificial, are sustained due to their strategic geographical locations on Earth. So, for example, the forest, grasslands, mangroves, freshwater, and the marine. The last one is the genetic diversity. It is to develop a specific characteristic that permits it to adjust to new environmental pressures such as climate change or disease. For example, human diversity is observed even in closely related individuals due to genetic differences. So this one, you might look a bit like your siblings, but you're not exactly the same. So you have different heights, hair colors, and maybe even different personalities. So next, let's proceed to the next slide. So we have the mega biodiverse countries. It refers to top biodiversity, rich countries including the Philippines. The concept is used to highlight awareness of the conservation issues around the world. So this one, mega biodiverse are nations that have exceptionally high level of biodiversity, meaning they have a wide variety of plants, animals, and other living things. So these countries are special because they have a lot of endemic species, they have a high level of species diversity, and many have coastlines. The concept mega biodiverse countries is used to raise awareness about the importance of protecting these amazing natural treasures and their unique biodiversity. So the next slide is the interaction of the three types of biological diversity. The ecosystem diversity, species diversity, and genetic diversity are interconnected. So these three interaction of the three types of biological biodiversity, ecosystem provides habitat that support a specific species, each with unique genetic traits. So genetic diversity allows specific species to adapt to changes in their environment, ensuring the overall health and resilience of the biosphere. So this interconnected highlights the importance of conserving all the three types of biodiversity. So the next one is the distribution of biodiversity. We have climate. So biodiversity affects climate at local, regional, and global levels. Consequently, modifications in land use and land cover that affect biodiversity can affect climate. The next one is the altitude. Low altitudes are more diverse than higher altitudes. So the last one is the soils. Organisms living in soil in the mineral and nutrient components act together to produce high diversity and complexity, feeding back to the biodiversity richness through habitat and nutrient provisions. Next slide is the presence of other species. So organisms interact with other organisms in an ecosystem, which is known as ecological interactions. So the presence of other species in ecosystem leads to ecological interactions where organisms constantly interact with
Consequences of biodiversity loss. So, ano nga ba ang biodiversity loss? It refers to the decline or extinction of various plant and animal species within an ecosystem. So, the consequences of this loss are far-reaching and include disruptions to ecosystem services, reduced resilience to environmental changes, and negative impacts on human health and well-being. So the consequences of biodiversity loss are alteration in ecosystem could bring varied effects. Next is a change in biodiversity could have erratic effects not only on a wildlife or a marine life but also on a human beings. We can infer that when our ecosystem is not well taken care of, biodiversity encounters changes that may impact human health on such different levels. The next is traits to biodiversity. Ano nga ba yung traits to biodiversity? So it refers to any factors or activities that negatively impact the variety of life on Earth, encompassing the variety of species, their genetic diversity, and the ecosystems they inhabit. These threats endanger the balance and health of ecosystems and the survival of many species. So, major traits identified by United Nations Environment Program. The sentence means that the United Nations Environment Program has identified the most significant factors causing harm to biodiversity. Next is habitat loss and destruction. So, it refers to the process by which natural environments are significantly altered or eliminated, rendering them uninhabitable for the species that rely on them for survival. The next is alterations in ecosystem compositions. So it refers to a changes in the relative abundance or distribution of species with an ecosystem. So this can involve changes in the number